the window here?
What?
Can you see that? That you can see the live chat.
Yes, I can see that.
Okay, good. All right, let me go to it real quick.
We are live. What?
Can you see that? Why, hello, 14 viewers watching. How is everybody? We'll give it a minute to... Oh my gosh, they're already chatting.
Yeah. Matt Bird says, I'll be writing about Stanley on my blog later tonight. Many friendly friends on Facebook have sent me their thoughts on
Robzilla.
This is something that...
What's up, Adam? We've got one more guest that I want to see if we can get. Oh, we got two more guests. There's Javi. What's up, man?
Hey, what's up, Brad?
Hey, buddy. Thanks for joining us. Hey, what's up?
Hi. Brad says hi.
What's up? I see pictures of your kids at the Comic-Cons. I feel like I know them.
Oh, thanks.
You give me hope for one day. I take my daughter.
Oh, Zach, an old timer, DJ Strong in the house.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah.
Strong, aka Spider on the message board. What's
Spider. How far back does Spider go on the boards, man?
I think he goes back to like
pre-2000.
02, maybe even.
Oh, wow.
I know at least 02.
Well, Spider, you would know. When did you join the site, man? You're a long timer. He'll write in the chat in a minute when it catches up. 1999, you came on the site. Woo! 1 year into my site was, woof.
I think when you started the message board, I think he started.
Oh my gosh, he was one of the first.
Yeah, and I remember him from the Alvaro boards, and he is a proud papa.
Wow. I remember when he was engaged, and he amassed it on the message board.
Yeah.
Wow, that's crazy. Austin, what's up, sir? What's up, sir? Hello, also 24 viewers. We have one more guest we're waiting on to come on. Should I announce who it is, or should I just let him show up?
Let him show up.
Let him show up. It's someone that you've asked for. The fans have demanded that he come back to the Crawlspace, and I'm not sure. Peter, I know Peter hasn't. I'm not sure if Javi has met this person that's coming.
I did send him a text that says, "Where are you?"
Okay. Sam's Tangled Web. George will be joining us a little bit later. He couldn't make the exact 9 o'clock. He said he'll try to stop in a little later.
Base front, true believers.
Marlon, hello from the UK.
That actually wasn't a bad fan impression. Nobody gave me any credit.
Or. Happy?
I told Brad I'm on my way, leaving work, man. Okay.
Testing 1, 2, 3.
You're here.
Okay.
Let's see. The suspense, Adam, is killing you. Wow.
Yes.
Did our mysterious friend text you back, Zach?
Yes, he said that he's leaving work.
Oh, all right. Well, he'll join us within the show. I say we start. Are you guys ready?
He should be home in 10 minutes. So.
Yeah.
Okay. He can hop on a little bit later. He'll be a surprise guest.
Yeah.
Okay. Coming down 3-2. Hey, Crawlspacers. What? This is. I just messed that up. No, Adam. It is not Dan Slott. He will not be joining us.
Oh, there's a snowball chance.
Yeah. If I don't know.
Anyway. There's no way I'm asking you to give my eulogy, Brad. That's for sure. No.
Dude, you've been dead for the last 10 years on this podcast. Yeah, I've been giving it every month. Is this news? No, it's not news. I came out of the grave for this. You did. You did.
Good. I like that one.
All right. Coming down 3-2. Hey, Crawlspacers, this is kind of a shine the spider up in the sky and see who shows up. I didn't want to send this signal up, but unfortunately, we kind of knew it was coming a little bit over the last several months. The passing of Stan Lee. So I invited a bunch of my friends who I wouldn't otherwise know if not for Stan Lee and Steve Ditko creating Spider-Man back in 1962. So let's introduce the panel. We've got Zach. What's going on, sir?
You know, until you said that, I wasn't getting emotional, but I'm getting a little teary-eyed.
Yeah, we wouldn't know each other, would we?
No,
we really wouldn't. Because I don't like you like football. I don't really am not a sports guy. Spider-Man is our common thread or web of the thread for all of our friendships here.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I've known each other for the better part of 15 years now, and I can tell you, it has been a wild ride, but it wouldn't be possible without Stanley.
No doubt. And we've got JR. What's going on, JR?
Well, I knew that when I heard the news, I said, you know what? I'm probably going to get a text today, kind of like with Ditko. So yeah, it's like you said, we knew it was coming, but that doesn't make it any less solemn. Yeah,
you know, I sent you the similar text back in July when Ditko passed away, and it's literally amazing that Spider-Man's two fathers died in 2018. It's just so sad.
Yeah, it's. But again, I mean, not unexpected, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And in fact, I suppose one should say that should be grateful that they had him for as long as we did.
95 years. That's just incredible. We also have Javi. Welcome, Javi.
Hey, thanks for having me, Brad. It's an honor.
How'd you hear the news today, sir?
Just randomly scrolling on the internet and saw a story, or maybe it was Facebook. I don't even remember. I just remember thinking, it's got to be a hoax, right?
Yeah.
Even though, I mean, I've been expecting it for over a year.
Yeah.
But,
you know, it was one of those things that when we did the
Ditko.
Well, not even the Ditko. When we did the news on Joan, Patrick, you know, I think I remember saying specifically that it was going to be pretty soon.
Mm-hmm. It was just over a year, wasn't it?
Just a little over a year, yeah. So, not surprised. He was 95.
Mm-hmm.
He was almost 7 weeks away from his 96th birthday.
Damn.
It's crazy.
Didn't you and him share a birthday, Zach?
100 though.
Zach, do you and him share a birthday? If I remember correctly,
we do. We share a birthday. So my birthday twin is with my actual twin today.
Yeah,
and, that's kind of cool.
We also have Ashley. What's going on, Ashley?
I'm good. I can't. It's amazing how we keep saying, you know, he was 95. It's as tragic as it is. It's not an unexpected, but it still managed to take me completely by surprise today.
Yeah. And we also have Peter, aka Chi-Town. What's up, sir?
Excelsior forever, everyone.
No doubt.
Yeah, I found out about it just like Javi did, just scrolling through the net, and just like you guys said, you know, if it weren't for Stan, I wouldn't be playing your sandbox.
Including the YouTube chat, we're all around the world.
Yeah.
Through Spider-Man and this website and Stan Lee's contribution, we've made so many friends because of him. It's amazing his reach impacted all of us. So I just think that's crazy. Anybody else? How did you guys hear about it? Actually, I didn't hear how you found out today.
It's kind of funny. I was at my, I was in the break room taking my lunch break at work. And one of the guys I work with, he's, we talk Marvel all the time. You know, he knows I'm super into comics and Spider-Man. We're always talking about the shows and the movies. He just walks in and I'm in the middle of like eating my lunch and he just is standing over and he just kind of stares down at me deadpan. And I'm like, oh my God, what's wrong? And he just says, Stanley's dead. And I'm like, shit, that's huge.
That's
you're the reason I found out, Ashley. It's all your fault.
It was my phone.
Find out from a friend.
I know. I saw it on Facebook, and then my phone started blowing up.
Yeah, I immediately put it to the admin chat.
Yeah.
So that everyone
it's funny. I used to be on television. I used to be a reporter, and now I teach television at a high school. And the sheer amount of teenagers that know who Stan Lee is kind of surprising, because about a month ago when Burt Reynolds died, none of the teenagers knew who Burt Reynolds was. Almost all of the teenagers knew who Stan Lee is or was. And
well,
so,
and then all the cameos, and that's what they also
cameos, yeah. But you wouldn't think teenagers would know who a 95-year-old man is usually. So I think that was just interesting.
How many generations is that? It's what? 3 or 4?
Is it not? Well, it wouldn't be 90 because he didn't start when he was 10. So wouldn't it be 88 generations?
No.
No.
How does that work?
Generations is 20 years. So
it is. I thought it was 10. Okay.
Yeah,
like how many generations are familiar with Stan Lee? How many generations has he influenced?
4, because of Captain America.
The 40s.
In the 40s, and even his work in the 50s a little bit, but mainly the 60s, the 70s, and the 60s through now. That's been at least almost 2.5 generations at this point. I mean, 50 years in over 50 years of Spider-Man, almost 60 years. So that's almost 3 generations just of Spider-Man and the Fantastic Four. And then not to mention his work on Captain America, which influenced a lot of people considering the time period of which he was writing that book.
Yeah.
And with the way the movies are going, I mean, I don't see an end to his influence on.
Actually, I think that's 5 generations. Because it's Greatest Generation.
Yes.
Baby Boomers, Gen X, Millennials, and Gen Y.
Wow. You know, Javi was talking about the cameos. He's got at least 2 more, maybe more. He's got the Captain Marvel movie cameo. He's also got Avengers 4, which they confirmed he's shot. So,
and I thought around Guardians 2, they said, like James Gunn said, they had done 7. They filmed 7 of them. I don't know if that counts Venom or anything else, or what they plan on doing with those now that he's gone. If they're going to stick with.
I'm wondering if he's in the Spider-Verse cartoon movie.
I mean, he's got to be.
Did any of y'all seen Teen Titans Go to the movies?
Yes. No. If he was in that.
He was in that?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it was a self-referential cameo. It's beautiful.
Oh, that's funny. I like seeing him in the video game recently. I thought that was awesome. That was a great.
Ironically, I'm on New Game Plus right now, and right at the spot where I'm at in that game was that cameo.
That's Stanley cameo.
That's where I was at today when I.
Yeah, that Peter of all people, you love that Mary Jane Peter Parker Stan cameo. Yeah, that's really cool.
And here's something that I just came across that just is really sad, but it really is poignant. It says, one day soon, sooner than you expect, given the man's age, he's in his 90s, remember, you'll be sitting in a movie theater watching a superhero movie from Marvel, just as you've done lots of times before. But this time it's different. This time there was no cameo by Stan Lee.
No.
And there won't be any more cameos in Marvel movies ever again. This time the words will say, in loving memory of Stan Lee.
Oh,
great. And when you see these words, you're going to start crying like a baby. You know you will, and so will I.
Who said that?
That was a meme that was, I guess, shared. And very, very true. And I'm trying not to get choked up.
Yeah. JR, how'd you hear about it?
Actually, I got a text from my daughter today.
Oh, really?
Yeah, she said there's what was I about to say? She said, "Did Stan Lee really die?" And I didn't. Of course, that I rather than say, "Oh, I don't know, let me check," I said, "Oh yeah, I knew about it all the time." But yeah, I went and I looked up in like multiple sources. But yeah, she was the one that tipped me off that something had happened.
Yeah. Zach, did I ask you how you found out?
Me?
Zach.
I made the joke about Ashley is the one that told me because it was in our Facebook group.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
And because I haven't been able to have my phone on me. I mean, I've been in my new job. I can't, for security reasons, I can't have my phone with me in the classroom. So I was on a break and checking on it, and I was like, and trying not to cry.
I'll ask the YouTubers how many are watching now? 35 of you. How did you find out? I'll read some of those. I'm
going to read some of the previous ones.
Okay. I was going to read Adams, how he said he saw a nice tribute from the U.S. Army's Twitter today. I'm not sure what they said.
They said something like, what was it, like farewell soldier or thank you soldier or something like that, and had a picture of him in his service days. I think I had just been on it. So
yeah, I mean, I did record the 3 nightly news reports on them. All 3 were actually the one I liked the least was ABC's, which is ironic considering it was owned by Disney. But
what did they do poorly?
It wasn't as in depth as the other two. They were all three good. The other two were really, really good.
Yeah.
They got the guy from Sunday Morning to do the feature on CBS, and I liked NBC's quite a bit. They tended to focus on the legacy of like how Disney bought Marvel and things like that, and but the CBS one kind of focused on how it was Stan and Steve Ditko and Jack Kirby, and so it kind of gave a little bit more of a more rounded tribute, whereas just focused simply on Stan with the ABC. But this is probably, I saw online Glenn Beck made he was doing one of his shows, and he had they'd stopped to pause to remember Stan. So shortly after, I guess, the news broke, it was around 2:00 Central Time. And he compared it to the death of Walt Disney.
Yeah.
How different the world would be without Walt Disney in it. And he compared it very much that Stan Lee is in that same realm as Disney, which is ironic considering who owns Marvel now.
Right. Reading some of the YouTube chat comments, Jonathan said a friend texted him. Austin said, I saw a headline after going to CBR. The Devil Breaker went to get a haircut and then came back to find out, and his heart stopped when he found the story. Rob Zilla says he found out 30 minutes ago on YouTube. He can't believe it. I love that man. Sam says, I started seeing stuff pop up on Facebook. Clover saw it on Facebook. And let me see. Matt saw a coworker's phone, and he saw the news on a coworker's phone and just started welling up.
His niece Heidi shares the birthday of December 28th, Matt Bird. So your niece Heidi and I share a birthday. I'm nobody important, though. So
you're the clone of Stan Lee, Zach. You share the same birthday.
Believers.
The 27th clone of Stan Lee.
The 27th.
You know what?
Wait a minute. Is his birthday the 27th of December?
No, it's the 28th.
Oh, so you're the one after Ben. There you go. Yeah. We can always.
Hey, Zach, you said that Stan Lee's death, the announcement kind of reminded you of like Walt Disney.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Another celebrity comes to mind is Jim Henson.
Oh, 1990, yeah. Again, owned by Disney. Mm-hmm. It all comes back to the mouse.
Mohammed actually shared it in our Facebook group. Rest in peace, soldier, comic book creator at Real Stan Lee. At the age of 95, Lee served in the U.S. Army Signal Corps during World War II from 42 to 45. We are deeply grateful for his service to our country and for his tremendous support to our service members. Excelsior.
Is it we'll get to the quotes from celebrities in a second. I want to go around the horn and ask what was the first time you discovered who Stan Lee was, or what was the very first thing that you heard the name Stan Lee? I can start and I'll open it up. The very first time I discovered Stan Lee was his voice, and it was on Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, and he introed each episode with, "Hey, true believers, this Spider-Man, blah 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 blah," and that was the very first time I heard the voice, and I always wondered who Stan Lee Presents was. I thought his last name was Presents. At the very top of comics in the 70s through 90s, I think. Right before it gave you the little recap origin at the top of the book, it said Stan Lee Presents Spider-Man or something like that. When I saw his face for the first time, I think it was when there was an ad in Marvel Comics in the mid-'80s, I think, for you could send off for a VHS, learned how to draw the Marvel way with him and John Buscema. And I sent off for that. It was $20, and I bought the 2-pack for like $30. It was a deal. And you could get that and a 30-minute pilot of Pride of the X-Men, which was the unsold pilot of the X-Men cartoon from the 80s. So that is my first memory. JR, you're the oldest on the panel.
Yeah, I'm the closest to actually seeing Stan in person nowadays. But,
what was your first memory of when you noticed who Stan Lee was, what his contribution was?
He's so old he can't remember.
I was about to say that's not an inaccurate assessment there, Zach, because I don't exactly remember. I think I remember the Stan Lee soapboxes from the his pontificating there from the comics. I think probably I wouldn't say the first memory, but I suppose that kind of solidified it was a couple of things. They were both Christmas gifts, I think. Actually, a Spider-Man calendar from like 1978 that I got, and the Origin of Marvel Comics written by Stan. And I think those were, I mean, as far as I can remember, kind of what crystallized for me, like who Stan was, his contribution to the creation of Spider-Man and Marvel Comics, and just the personality. I mean, the personality that became, Stan and Marvel and everything like that. So I would say probably receiving those two things.
Yeah. Just the complete opposite of Steve Ditko.
There is no more polar opposite person than Steve Ditko. Stan Lee was the I mean, Stan Lee is a complex guy because on one hand you've got the man, and then you've got the myth, and somewhere in the middle is the truth. And we're going to deify Stan Lee as honestly, as an ambassador to comics in general, not just Marvel, not just DC, but the medium.
Is there another ambassador to comics, by the way? Is there another face?
Not like him.
Not to the level of Stan. Yeah.
And is there anybody even a close second?
I can't think of anyone.
Can you think of anybody?
No, I mean,
I don't know if you heard me. I said Kevin Smith.
I was about to say that would be the closest, but that's way distant.
He's a reader. He's not a creator.
But he wrote comics.
He wrote that off the Black Cat miniseries. Right?
He's in the geek culture, Kevin Smith, but not as creative as him.
Yeah. I just, I don't think that I don't think there's anybody that's as good of an ambassador.
Adam in YouTube chat says DC never really had an ambassador like Stan Lee.
No,
that's very true.
And to be quite frank, DC didn't need an ambassador like Stan Lee.
Why?
Because Superman and Batman were so transcendent before Stan Lee. I'm talking before Stan Lee, and so ingrained in the popular culture that they didn't need an ambassador.
Wow. Vinkman in the YouTube chat says he was first introduced to Stan from a cameo he did on an episode of Muppet Babies called Comic Capers in 1989. Do you remember that, Fred? Is that the one where Ralph the dog put on the Spider-Man mask, Vinkman, and Skeeter and him swung around? If that's true, yes, I do remember that cameo. H Street says, my first time hearing about who he was when I rode the Spider-Man ride at Universal Islands of Adventure. He had a cameo at the end. Let's see. I think Bob Kane could have been DC's Stan, but that didn't.
But Bob Kane's an asshole, so no, nobody liked Bob Kane.
Hey.
No, I'm sorry, but it is well known and documented that nobody liked Bob Kane. In fact, Bob Kane is the antithesis of Stan Lee.
I thought Stan and Bob were friends, though.
They were friends, but Bob,
someone liked them.
Bob rubbed people the wrong way so often, and you didn't see that with Stan. You want to talk about somebody that's the antithesis of Stan? Bob made a lot of enemies in his life, whereas Stan made a couple. Steve Ditko.
Vinkman confirms that was indeed the same Muppet Baby. Yeah, I can talk Muppet Babies if I need to. I can pull that out of my hat.
That for trivia night.
I have that for trivia night, yes. Bob Kane in the first Batman '89 movie. I remember that. You guys remember that?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm seeing some of the cartoons that have been drawn.
No, he didn't make a cameo. It was just there was a drawing with his.
It was a drawing. It was
a drawing.
Hey, there he is.
There's our mystery guest that I teased earlier. That the fans have demanded he return. Donovan, what's up, sir?
Hey, how y'all doing? Can you hear me all right?
Very good. Very good. You got that epic camera shot with you and your. I love your bookshelf behind you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I should probably have the lights off.
Remember when we started back in the day, you could do a podcast without lights?
Yeah. You remember when we could do the podcast without pants?
Yeah. Speak for yourself. I got a shot up top.
You're like Anchorman on the desk. You're wearing the shorts.
Oh my God.
Don, let's catch up with you a little bit. When did you first learn about the news?
Josh Bertoni texted me. I was playing Spider-Man PS4.
Oh wow!
When Josh texted me, and I instantly stopped. And the next hour was just me online.
Yeah.
And I texted my brother as well.
Yeah. The other question, I haven't opened it up to the rest of the panel with the exception. I think I just shared mine and JR. Yeah. Don, we'll go to you next. What was your first introduction of Stan Lee? When did you first associate him with Marvel, or first time you saw him?
I tried to think about that because, I think because he was narrating the cartoons for a while. He narrated Amazing Friends.
Yep.
And I think he narrated the 1980s cartoon. I think in 1998, in the last episode of the 90s show, I saw that clip earlier today where Spider-Man meets his creator Stan Lee.
Yeah.
I think that was probably the first solid time where it's okay, I know explicitly who this guy is, and he was definitely the first comic creator I knew as a person, rather than just a name I might have read in a comic book. He was definitely the first comic creator I was aware of.
Greg in YouTube chat says his first introduction to Stan Lee was the newspaper comic strip. Yeah, that always said right at the very right hand side, by Stan Lee.
I'll jump in, Brad, if you want me to.
Yeah, Phil, first time you discovered who Stan Lee was.
I remember Stan's soapboxes in the 90s, reading those, but I think around the same time that the Stan Lee saying, "Who is that exotic woman?" being his wife, as Madam Web.
I'm very fond of it, or something like that. She said.
Yeah, that was great.
Right, Joan was the voice of Madam Web, wasn't she?
Yep.
Oh yeah.
She makes an appearance on every Clone Saga Chronicles episode. First thing you hear. Wow. But between that and do you guys remember the flashback months where they did?
Spider-Man yeah. Chris Carlo did little art of Stan Lee at the corner or whatever. Yeah.
Well, it was every artist. So you had Mike Ringo's rendition of Stan as a fisherman, because it was a horror story. You had Stan with an Amazing, where Peter was reading comic books that he got from Uncle Ben by Joe Bennett. And then I don't remember who did the artwork for that Proto Goblin story that JR loved so much.
Yeah.
But so that was kind of, between those two things, that was kind of my first introduction to Stan, considering I was really in my infancy as a fan back in '98. But those were kind of my, and then as I kind of got into the fandom, and discovered a thing called the interwebs.
Yeah.
I was able to do all.
A couple interesting points from the YouTube chat. Adam asks who we have left from that era. Kirby is gone. Stan's gone.
Romita Sr.
We have Romita Sr. is still with us.
I was thinking about that because he actually worked on Captain America in the golden age post World War II. So I think Romita Sr. is the one. He probably is the longest running original comic books creator now that Stan's gone.
Yeah. And I was trying to think of Spider-Man specific people. Ross Andrew is gone, right?
Mm-hmm. Jerry Conway's still alive.
Jerry Conway. JR, who else have we lost?
Spider-Man specific. I can't think of anybody offhand.
Marv Wolfman's gone.
No, he's alive.
No,
Lynn Wean's gone.
Lynn Wean. I got my Marv Wolfman and Lynn Wean confused. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Ditko, obviously.
Ditko's gone. This year's Ditko and Lee, same year.
Is
July.
Pollard still around?
Is who?
Keith Pollard.
Yes, he's still around. I tried to get an interview with him. He's hard to get a hold of, but I love Keith Pollard stuff. The other one of the YouTube chat, it's since scrolled, but they said Stan was one of the first to put creator credits in the comics. DC never did that in pre-60s, maybe. So I like what Stan did with the creators. He also gave them cool nicknames like Jazzy John Romita. What's some other one? Jack King Kirby, Stan the Man Lee. He gave himself one, I guess. But Gil Kane. also has passed away, says Adam. Yes, Gil Kane and Mike Ringo. But anyway, first memories of Stan Lee. We have we had Zach up. Javi, what's the first time you remember Stan?
I mean, he was just always intertwined with it as far back as I can remember. I mean, like you, it was just hearing his voice in my Saturday morning cartoons, and I don't know when I made the connection that, you know, he was the writer of Amazing Spider-Man, but he just always was. You know, I can't think of anything specific.
Peter, how about you? What was your first memory you connected Stan Lee and Marvel together, who he was?
Right there with Javi and you, Brad. Amazing Friends. Hearing his voice. And I don't know, I think it was during the Spider-Friends origin. I believe
he did a lot of narration on that one.
Yeah, and so I want to know who he is. So I asked my older brother, and he told me. And then during my high school years, I used the library to, research Stan and find out more about him when I should have been studying for something else.
Did you guys also wonder why his name was at the very top of each page, from like the 60s to the 70s and 80s and 90s? It's like Stan Lee presents blah 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 blah.
It was almost like it was his company.
Yeah.
You know.
Exactly.
Well, I mean, nobody was Marvel more than Stan Lee.
Yeah.
I JR, to bring it to Star Trek, the Star Trek, one of my Star Trek fan sites that I go to, they did all the Star Trek people remembering Stan Lee, including Shatner and stuff like that. And they found the very first connection between Stan Lee and Star Trek. Back in the 80s, when the first movie came out, they did like a book, a novel of Star Trek, and it said Stan Lee presents Star Trek.
The motion picture. Yeah.
Motion picture. Yeah, and I thought that was
cool. They did a comic of the motion picture. Yeah, I have that one.
Yeah, I think that's funny. Ashley, first time you connected who Stan Lee was?
Oh my God, I've been trying to rack my brains ever since we started, because when I grew up, it was already when we were in that age where he was self-referential at that point, where cameos were really commonplace. Someone in the comments, I think, jogged my memory. It was the Amazing Spider-Man ride at Universal Studios in Orlando, except I was not but 8 at the oldest when I first rode that ride. So I just remember all I would have noticed was, hey, who's this old man? But it's something that got just ingrained in my subconscious. I remember the cameos in the first 3 Spider-Man movies, the Sam Raimi ones.
Yeah.
And I guess it must have been my friends or Jack, and they're talking about Stan Lee and the cameos, and it just kind of clicked, like, oh, that's him, that's Stan Lee, and it just kind of all fell into place from there. So there wasn't any moment where I can definitively place what that first experience was.
It's always been a part of our
in pop culture at that point. So
yeah. Zach, we were talking about, we're going to read some tweets and posts, and I've
got one from a sort of a Twitter user that I know you're blocked from. So if you want me to read it, I know he's a very popular person on the show.
How about I start with Tom Holland and not Dan Slott? How about we do that?
Brad, when do you want to do the obituary for Marvel? After the tweets?
Oh, yeah, let's do the tweets and the remembrances. I'll read a couple. Zach, you can take over a little bit.
Okay.
Tom Holland has put a thing up on Instagram. Quote, how many millions of us are indebted to this guy? None more so than me. The father of Marvel has made so many people so incredibly happy. What a life and what a thing to have achieved. Rest in peace, Stan. Robert Downey Jr. said, quote, I owe it all to you. Rest in peace, Stan. Chris Evans, there will never be another Stan Lee. For decades, he provided both young and old with adventure, escape, comfort, confidence, inspiration, strength, friendship, and joy. He exuded love and kindness and will leave an indelible mark on so many lives. Excelsior. Zoe Saldana, Gamora, and Uhura. Today we lost one of the greats, the real Stan Lee. You were an inspiration and superhero to us all. Thank you for contributing so much and giving us all something to aspire to. Ryan Reynolds, Deadpool, says, thanks for everything, Stan. We also have Hugh Jackman, Wolverine. We've lost a creative genius. Stan Lee was a pioneering force in the superhero universe. I'm proud to have been a small part of his legacy and to have helped bring one of his characters to life. Mark Hamill, Luke Skywalker himself, says his contribution to pop culture was revolutionary and cannot be overstated. He was everything you hoped he would be and more. I love this man and will never stop missing him. They say you should never meet a childhood idol. They are wrong. Rest in peace, Stan. Mark Hamill, also the voice of the Joker and the Hobgoblin from the 90s cartoon. Bob Iger, the chairman and CEO of the Walt Disney Company. Stan Lee was as extraordinary as the characters he created, a superhero in his own right to Marvel fans around the world.
I got Kevin Smith. Kevin Smith says on Instagram.
I was in the middle of Bob Iger. All right, wait a minute. Let me finish Bob Iger's quote, and then you can have it. Hold on.
All right.
Stan Lee was as extraordinary as the characters he created, a superhero in his own right to Marvel fans around the world. Stan had the power to inspire, to entertain, and to connect. The scale of his imagination was only exceeded by the size of his heart. Okay, Zach, you can have some.
All right, so I got JMD Mateus as soon as it rolls up. Good Lord. Well, okay, anyway, I'll come back to JMD. Kevin Smith, he says he's got a picture of him sitting on a throne of Stan and I think Jay and Silent Bob. And he says, this is how I always see you at Real Stan Lee, as our benevolent leader and king, smiling down from your eternal throne on the generations of imaginations you fed and inspired. You were the first creator whose voice I knew before I actually heard it. You dreamed up some of my favorite modern myths and created characters that instilled me with a moral barometer, teaching me right from wrong and showing me it's always better to be the hero instead of a villain. Your characters represented us. Yes, they had extraordinary, unbelievable abilities, but they were also reflections of a world we knew where a Spider-Man really is just a boy who just wants to help. You showed me how to interact with the audience whenever you stepped into Stan's soapbox to reach out to the readers. You showed me how to advocate for my field beyond the actual art itself whenever you tub thumped for comic books outside of the medium. It was never enough for you to simply make a comic because you were a true salesman at heart. So you not only sold comics, you sold me on comics, so much that I built a life and career around your dreams and ideals. When you did Mallrats with us, you not only made a lifelong fan's dream come true, you also lent me comic book credibility that I still get to spend today. Whether it was for at Comic Book Men, AMC, or Yoga Hosers, whenever I get asked to borrow your heat again, you were always there for me with a smile. Your love story with Joni and your long, happy marriage always shine as an example of what I wanted from my personal life. I long admired and emulated your kindness and patience and sense of humor when dealing with your public. Outside of my parents, you were the one adult who gave me the most useful life skills I use today. Thank you, Stan, for making me not only the boy I was, but also the man I am today. You had great power, and you always used it responsibly, fostering billions of dreamers who all know your name, a name written in the stars for all time. You are not just a literary titan of comic books. You are a modern-day Mark Twain. I will miss you all my days, my friend and my hero. Excelsior forevermore.
One thing, speaking of the stars, one of my favorite people is Neil deGrasse Tyson. And he put out a tweet today. It said, born before Edwin Hubble discovered the expanding universe, he ultimately created an expanding universe of his own, one of scientifically literate superheroes such as Spider-Man, the Hulk, Iron Man, and Black Panther. Rest in peace, Stan Lee. I thought that was really nice.
Dan Slott writes, no writer or their work has ever had a profound effect on my life.
Hold on a second, I couldn't hear you. JR was fiddling. I got to hear the slot. Here we go.
Right. No writer or their work has ever had as profound an effect on my life as that of Stan the Man Lee. In the history of the written word, no one even comes close. His stories will continue for every generation, never the end, always to be continued. Excelsior. Then he wrote later, there's so much more I'd like to say, so many memories I'd like to share. My heart won't stop pounding and my eyes keep watering up. And I have to wrap up a Fantastic Four plot today. Can't think of a better way to honor him in this moment than keeping the characters alive.
That was pretty good. Peter, you want to do how long is the Marvel wrap up?
About as long as the Zach tweet that he read, but not that much. Okay. So Marvel.com did an obituary of Stan. Thank you, Zoe, for doing that right now. And he wrote first Marvel.com put in a quote that Stan Lee did, and I'll try to read this in the voice of Stan Lee best as I can. I used to be embarrassed because I was just a comic book writer while other people were building bridges and going on.
Hold on. Don't do the stand. Read it straight.
Okay.
I can't do it, dude. I can't do it. I can't do it.
All right, no problem. Stan writes, I used to be embarrassed because I was just a comic book writer while other people were building bridges and going on medical careers. And then I began to realize entertainment was one of the most important things in people's lives. Without it, they might go off the deep end. I feel that it is, if you're able to entertain, you're doing a good thing. Marvel and Disney remember Stan Lee. Today, Marvel Comics and the Walt Disney Company pause and reflect the great sadness of the passing of Marvel's chairman and Britain's Stan Lee. With a heavy heart, we share our deepest condolences with his daughter and brother, and we honor and remember the creator, voice, and champion of Marvel. Stan Lee was an extraordinary as the characters he created, a superhero in his own right to Marvel fans around the world. Stan had the power to inspire, to entertain, and to connect. The scale of his imagination was only exceeded by the size of his heart, said Bob Iger, chairman and CEO of the Walt Disney Company. Stanley Martin Lieber, a.k.a. Stan Lee, loved the written word from an early age. He wanted to craft stories like those in his favorite books and films, which he consumed voraciously. From the simple upbringing in the teenage landscape of Manhattan, young Stanley worked his way through a succession of jobs until the day he found himself as an assistant at the comic book company Timely Comics. In between refilling artists' inkwells, erasing pencil lines from the comic pages, and fetching untold number of lunches, Stanley expressed his desire to write and create tales of his own in May of 1941 issue Captain America Comics number 3. He got his wish. Readers would find a prose story in the issue Captain America foils the traitor's revenge. Sporting by the byline of Stan Lee, a star was born. As Stan's roles and tenures of Timely Comics grew and evolved, so did the company itself. With Stan at the helm, Timely Comics morphed into the Atlas Comics, and then into the name that would catapult into the legend forever with Stan Lee, Marvel Comics. As Marvel's editor-in-chief, Stan the Man Lee made his voice and voice of the stories themselves, writing virtually every Marvel title and working with such luminaries as Jack Kirby, Steve Ditko, Don Heck, Gene Colan, and John Romita. Stan began building a universe of unlocking continuity, where fans felt they could turn to the street corner and run into their favorite superhero. A rich collection of characters grew out of the nonstop plotting sessions with the artists, including the Fantastic Four, Spider-Man, Thor, Iron Man, the Hulk, and the X-Men, and so much more. Today it would be almost impossible to find the corner of the Marvel universe that Stan didn't have a hand in. There's a little bit more, but I'll cut it short for that.
Let's open up discussion. Any thoughts about what we just read?
Well, something that Peter just pointed out, we still have Larry Lieber here, so he would be another one of those spider creators that we still have that's Stan's on brother. The senior side. Yeah.
Yeah. Who just recently retired from the comic strip. Alex Savick took over the daily art on the comic strip. Any other thoughts?
Yeah. I remember that story of how he struggled with his identity and his career and comparing himself to other people who he thought were off doing bigger, greater things, more important things, while he was just doing something like on just drawing comics. So I remember Jack and I watched a documentary about him years ago, and that story just was such an eye opener for us that oh my God, what Stan Lee felt insecure about this, and so. Yeah, I just remember that really well. Yeah.
One thing I've stumbled across several times, because like your Facebooks are blowing up with, since you like a lot of comic book things like I do, it's all Stan Lee, just Stan Lee stories, scrolling through. One thing that's been in my feed a lot, I thought I'd read it, I'll read it fairly quickly, was from a 1968 soapbox, Stan Lee soapbox. When I read Stan Lee's soapbox in the 80s, it was mainly pitching, hey, there's a Spider-Man movie coming out by Canon. Hey, there's a Captain America movie coming out. Hey, there's a this and that. But in the 60s, he was pitching comics And he was also kind of talking about society a little bit. And this one was from 1968. I'll read it. This is Stan's words. Stan's soapbox. Let's lay it on the line. Bigotry and racism are among the deadliest social ills plaguing the world today. But unlike a team of costume supervillains, they can't be halted with a punch in the snoot or a zap from the ray gun. The only way to destroy them is to expose them, to reveal them for the insidious evils that they really are. The bigot is an unreasoning hater, one who hates blindly, fanatically, indiscriminatively. If his hang-up is black men, he hates all black men. If a redhead once offended him, he hates all redheads. If some foreigner beat him to a job, he's down on all foreigners. He hates people he's never seen, people he's never known, with equal intensity, with equal venom. Now, we're not trying to say it's unreasonable for one human being to bug another, but although anyone has the right to dislike another individual, it's totally irrational, patently insane to condemn an entire race, to despise an entire nation, to vilify an entire religion. Sooner or later, on our own merits, sooner or later, we must learn to judge each other on our own merits. Sooner or later, if man is ever to be worthy of his destiny, we must fill our hearts with tolerance. For then, and I'm trying to open this because the text is blocking it. Be worthy. How can I get the text off of this thing? Open image, a new tab. Let's see if that helps. Okay, there it goes. Okay. I'm sorry. I was on a good roll and that all the Twitter text at the very end. Sooner or later, if man is to ever be worthy of his destiny, we must fill our hearts with tolerance. For then, and only then, will we be truly worthy of the concept that man was created in the image of God, a God who calls us all his children. Stan. So that was pretty progressive back in 1968, don't you think? What do you guys think of that?
Yeah, I think so too. And even on the obituary, it notes a little bit about that as well.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on that one?
It's still relevant today.
What, Javi and then Don. What Javi?
That it's still relevant today. We still need to hear that message today.
Yeah. Go ahead, Don.
I mean, he was always about that. He was always very transparent about that, and his comics were always very progressive, very liberally progressive. I wrote an essay a few years ago about how he wrote Joe and Randy Robertson. Mm-hmm. And I remember on the podcast, we were kind of having fun with like the whole protest storyline. But like when I was rereading it, like a year or so later, I was surprised and impressed how thoughtful it was, especially at the time, because it wasn't something that kind of he wasn't writing those two characters in a way to necessarily make white readers feel good 100% of the time. I mean, Robbie Robertson kind of was, but like there was a series of issues where Randy and Joe were just talking to each other as father and son about their place in society, and it doesn't really have anything to do with Spider-Man. And I was like, this to me is like, it's kind of something that gives me hope for like creativity. And I think that's something that he always kind of tried to do as somebody in the 60s. I mean, you could say his limits in writing like Sue Storm, what have you, but I think that like he always put forth the effort that was pretty impressive for his time. And that's an element that should never be forgotten. That, one of the arguably the greatest comics creator in terms of like character co-creation was on this side of the aisle and was on this side of history. And I think that should always be remembered.
Absolutely.
Along with race relations, also he fought for, drug awareness of drugs, the Spider-Man, the drug issues with Harry Osborn. He fought the Comics Code to get that in there. He
helped refine and reform the comic book code.
You got the Comics Code somewhere?
I got the it's like issue 90 something where like Harry's like tripping balls off acid or something. I got it.
Can I read something really quick, Brad?
Yeah, go ahead.
When something mattered to Stan, you felt it in his words, whether it was an editorial or the stories themselves. With passion for the medium, he helped refine and reform the Comics Code Authority and addressed hot-button issues like discrimination, drugs, and intolerance.
Yeah, no doubt. That kind of leads to what one of my other questions to the panel and also the YouTube channel or YouTube chat. What is your favorite Stan Lee? I guess it can be anything, but this is a Spider-Man show. What's your favorite? Oh, Don's got the actual issue right there. There you go.
Yeah, I mean, this bleeds into the death of Gwen Stacy, but like you see, like Harry, like how hard it was being drugs, and he's like, I'm dying inside, all the kind of stuff. I mean, this was off. The Comics Code was off the book because this had explicit drug usage, and it was like right here, and that was a code breaker. Dude,
I tell you what, Ditko's Doctor Strange man was trippy too. It looked like that stuff was on drugs, but there's pills all around that panel. I guess Comic Code didn't want a lesson about don't do drugs.
No.
Yeah, Harry Osborn wasn't our hero.
He frequently discussed when we were discussing those issues of how draconian the Comics Code was.
Yeah,
and he tried to get it approved. He took it to him. He said, "Look, the U.S. Department of Drug Enforcement, I think, agency, DEA, Nixon, right, JR?
Health, Education, and Welfare.
Health,
Education. At that time, yeah.
Okay. So the U.S. government comes to him and says, "Hey, write these books for us."
And then the U.S. government says,
"No, you can't do that."
Yeah, that's funny. Favorite Spider-Man Stan Lee story? Let's go around the horn. JR, you've read all of them. They were first printed.
That's cold.
What's your favorite?
Well,
you can name one or two if you want, whatever.
Excuse me. I had to look at Josh Nelson's list because I thought you were going to figured you were going to ask this question, and so I looked at other people's lists because I couldn't go through them all. But I probably have to say the oversized spectacular #2 with the Green Goblin.
Oh yeah,
that was just it was a classic Green Goblin story, and one of my faves. So I guess that's probably the one.
Zach,
come back to me.
Okay. Peter, what's your favorite?
Well, there's the obvious Amazing Fantasy #15.
Yeah.
But I'm going to say Amazing Spider-Man #100 was my fave.
100? Yeah. Don, what's your favorite?
It's not an easy question because I was vacillating between, is it the Master Planet arc? Is it, the Ramita stories where he, knocked out because of a cold? Is it like in ASM 50? I think in terms of the writing piece that he's done, maybe Amazing Fantasy 15, because that last line that was quoted verbatim in the 60s cartoon, it was like thus a legend is born. Let me see if I can do this from memory. Thus a legend is born. And from now on, there's a new addition is added to the roster of those who make the world of fantasy the most exciting realm of all. And I was like, that is impressively poetic.
Ooh, I'm impressed you got that off your memory. I don't even have that memorized. That's awesome. That's really good. Everybody remembers with great power there must also come great responsibility, but I guess that line you just quoted is before that famous line, isn't it?
It's the last one because it's like he learns with great power must come great responsibility. Thus a legend is born, and a new name is added to the.
Comes after the famous line. Okay, that's really impressive. Javi, favorite Stan Lee story?
I mean, there's so many to choose from, but I posted something on Instagram and on Facebook today. Probably the ones that meant the most to me are Amazing 39 and 40. Just the reveal of the identity to the Goblin, and that final battle when he gets to the end, he doesn't know what to do, and ultimately his compassion and his empathy, and he acknowledges that Harry's his dad's friend and that he can't all be bad, but there's got to be something in there, and his compassion wins the day. And it just always taught me to put myself in other people's shoes and to try and see their side of things. And I don't know, there's something about those issues that taught me a life lesson that's never gone away.
Peter, what's your favorite?
I already said Amazing Fantasy #15.
Sorry. I think Ashley's the last one.
Yeah.
Ashley, what's your favorite?
No, I'm there.
Oh, I'm coming back to Zach. I want you first.
I have to say, sadly, I'm not. I feel like I'm more familiar with Stan Lee on Doctor Strange than on Amazing Spider-Man. But what stands out to me most is just how inventive he was with language. There's no particular issue that comes to mind, but I will never forget Hoary Host of Hogarth as long as I live.
Nice. Where did that come from? This just Hoary Host of Hogarth. Yeah.
I think it was trolling the readers. Just making.
But it's catchy as hell.
Yeah, that's true.
It's a perfectly cromulent word.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he liked to do the alliteration. Hoary Hogarth, the 2 H's. He liked to do that with people's names, like
Walloping Web Snappers.
Yeah, Richard, Bruce Banner, Tony Stark. He didn't do it.
Scott Summers.
He just made it so much fun. Just
yeah, no doubt.
All right, I got mine.
Okay, let's hear it.
It's ASM 50 because I think that was the creative high point for the Romita run. I think that Spider-Man No More story where Peter starts really just truly having the doubts of being a hero and then picking up the mantle at the end of the issue because he knows it's the right thing to do. I just, to me, that was kind of a reset for Spider-Man, and a defining moment that I think often gets overshadowed by the death of Gwen Stacy. But that was definitely the high point of the Romita run, because I always view Stan with Ditko a little differently than I do Stan with Romita. I always view Stan with Romita a little more as it being Stan than I do necessarily with the Romita run, because I always felt like Ditko had a far bigger influence on the creative process because of the plotting aspect with Ditko. So obviously the 2 greatest of all time are the Master Planner and Amazing Fantasy, but to me, Clutches of the Kingpin is the high mark of that Romita run.
I've got 2 answers to this. The little kid in me loves Amazing 14 with the Hulk and Spider-Man and the Green Goblin. The little kid in me read that comic and said, you know what? This looks like that Amazing Friends episode where they all go to Hollywood. That one, still to this day, I read that. I can't. JR tore that issue apart, and it was the first appearance of Goblin when we did a Spider History, and I can't tear that issue apart because I love that issue so much.
Because it's like you and me and clones, right?
Yeah, I mean, it introduced 3 of my favorite. Well, it didn't introduce Spider-Man, but it introduced the Hulk to Spider-Man, and it introduced the Goblin, who I love. So I love, the little kid in me loves that issue. The little kid in me also loves Amazing Annual #1, where the Sinister Six first, like that.
Oh yeah,
pound was a lot of issue going on, and I forget because I read it in Marvel Tales. I think it was like issue 150 of Marvel. Yeah. Was it?
Yeah, it was.
You and I are about the same age. That was.
Yeah, I just looked at it today.
That or
it's
something.
150. Yeah.
Yeah, the little kid in me loves the first Sinister Six. The adult in me loves Amazing Fantasy 15, and especially Don quoting those wonderful written lines that I haven't thought about, because I always think of with great power, but I don't think of the extra lines. So the adult in me agrees with Don with Amazing Fantasy 15. Also, we mentioned the Master Planner. I love that. Is such for a comic to build. It used to be done in one, but Stan built that up to find out that that Doc Ock and the lifting of the rubble and Aunt May's dying. I mean, that was some high drama, well written for whatever that book cost, 25 cents, 10 cents, whatever, in the 60s. So those are my 3. And we have Neil. Welcome, Neil is joining us.
Hey guys, sorry I'm an hour late.
It's okay. I'll get to you. What's your favorite Stan Lee written Spider-Man story?
Oh hell, you're putting me on the dot, right? You're putting me on the spot right there.
You showed up an hour late.
Sorry, Dad. Probably the Mysterio debut story.
The Mysterio.
I don't remember it off the top, but I remember issue 13, the first appearance of Mysterio. One of my favorite villains.
Yeah,
I cannot understate that anymore. That it improved Spider-Man's intelligence that he didn't see through, but he was able to overcome Mysterio's illusions, and that solidified that as one of my favorite Stan Lee stories.
Another thing I want to ask the panel: do you have any favorite Stan Lee memories or things that of the panel? Who's met him?
I didn't get a chance to meet him, but I got a chance to see him.
You got a chance to see him. Okay, Peter, you've met Stan Lee.
Yes, I have.
About that.
The first time I met, there's 2 times. The first time, my wife, as a birthday present, allowed me to get a picture with Stan Lee. So I went to Wizard World Chicago.
You paid higher or lower than I did. How much was it?
$80.
Oh, you got me beat by 10 bucks. I was 70. I remember.
So I went to go meet him, and I'm wearing jeans and a white dress shirt, but underneath it I have my Spider-Man old costume.
Nice.
And I went to go meet him, and the people are like, "Don't shake hands with him. Don't shake hands."
Oh yeah.
But Stan, offered his hand, like he's like, "Hey, great costume," and I'm like, "Thanks, man." And my first name is actually Peter, and he's like, "That's even better," And he said, "Let's take this picture," and you do the flips, and he did, and he left such a great impression. And the second time I met him is actually when I got this book signed right here, one of my most prized possessions.
Oh, the wedding issue?
The wedding issue with Stan Lee's signature right there on MJ's dress. And he signs it, and I think he was like 93 at the time, and he's like, "How's that?" I was loving that signature. And I was like, "Yeah, that's great." And then he asked me to help him off the stage and go to his booth, because we were at the Marvel stage. And he asked me, because I was working the Marvel booth, and he just asked me to go right behind him. So I was basically holding Stan's shoulders and helping him all the way. Yeah, it's back around the crowd. It was a great experience for me. I loved it. I feel very privileged.
That's a good one.
By the way, welcome, George. What's up, sir?
Hey, how's it going? Neil's here.
Oh, God, he followed me.
And Donovan. We haven't talked to Donovan in a while. There's Don.
Hey, yeah, Don. What the hell? How's it going, dude?
That means welcome.
No, Don knows. Yeah, Don knows me well enough to know that.
George being here is a miracle, considering he's been fighting the flu. So more power to you,
dude. Not only have I been fighting the flu. All right. Not only have I been fighting the flu, but then I also had to DM D&D tonight.
I'm a nightmare for him.
Yeah. Oh God, the struggle is real. But hello, it's good to see everyone. Javi and JR and Zach and Peter and last but not least Ashley and Brad.
Did you ever meet Stan, George?
No, but I interviewed Stan on the phone for like an hour and a half.
Oh well, that's talking to him. That's interactions. Yeah. What was that like?
Intimidating, because like I'm talking to like it would be the same for me as if I had gotten to talk to Elvis, because I'm a huge Elvis fan.
Yeah. What memories do you have of that?
I remember the power going out in my house during the interview, and Stan having to call us back. But no, I mean, a lot of the stuff was stuff that he'd already said, like, in other places, other venues or whatever, over the years. I remember, he mused about the fact that there really wasn't like a charge for wanting to conquer the world. Like if Dr. Doom or Magneto walked up to a cop in New York and was like, "Yo, I want to take over the world," the cop's like, "The hell am I going to do?" there's not a law in the books for that. I can't really do anything. He called me Georgie, which normally I straight up hate and will kill a man.
but since God was talking to
you, call you that.
Yeah. So then suddenly it's Stan Lee, and suddenly it's endearing, and you just I'm George.
Take it, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, seriously, I would straight up nut tap somebody who called me.
Wow.
You know what I mean? I mean, like right in the tic tacs, just straight to the pill. But when Stan Lee does it, you're like, oh, okay.
Any other interactions with Stan Lee from the rest of the panel before I share mine?
I went to the it was the Edge of Time panel at San Diego Comic-Con, and it was the weirdest mashup of things ever. You had Laura Vanderroot, the girl that played Supergirl, right? You had Val Kilmer and Stan Lee.
Supergirl, Batman, and Stan Lee walking to a bar.
There's fan fiction in there somewhere.
Val Kilmer mode, so it's like, Jesus Christ, this guy let himself go.
Wait a minute. What? Edge of Time. Well, who did those two actors play in that video game?
Laura played MJ.
She played.
Okay.
And Kilmer was the 2099 bad guy, right?
Yes.
Oh,
That's
good
right. I remember
grief.
this.
Yeah.
Tiberius Stone.
Oh, wow. That's crazy.
So,
Any other memories of meeting him or talking to him?
We walked by him in 2013 at our Comic-Con. He was going to his booth to go sign, and the security was lifting the curtain for him to go in. And as he walked by, I snapped a quick picture, and he waved at me, and that's the closest I ever got.
Wow.
When that was happening, was it like people were like putting like a a towel or cape around James Brown? Like when like you'd be like, oh, if you're tired to go on, and they come over, no, James, Dave, we got a show, ow, and then you throw it back. Was it like
They
that?
did the Harlem Shuffle.
Something like that.
Stanley did the Harlem Shuffle. That's awesome. All right, I want to share my 3 encounters with him. The very first one was in the Chicago Comic-Con in the mid-90s. Like Javi was talking about, he was just walking through a convention at the Chicago Comic-Con, and he had handlers, and I see him walking towards me, and I'm like, that's Spider-Man's daddy. I got to talk to. So I walk up to him and I shake his hand, and I said, thank you for so many years of entertainment. He goes, well, thank you, kid, for reading, or something like that. And I said, Stan, you might, and I don't think I had a cell phone with me. I think I had one of those old digital cameras. And I'm like, you mind if we take a picture? He goes, no, we'll take pictures after the panel, but I'll see you soon, kid. So this is like 20-year-old Brad. So fast forward to 2007 with the Sal Buscema podcast.
One of the best shows the podcast, the Crawlspace has done.
That's one of my all-time favorites. I put something on the front page of the Crawlspace. I think it was like an embedded video from YouTube, and it involves Stan. And I get an email, and it was from Stan's people, and it says, "Hey, how'd you get that video? Stan would like a copy of it." And I said, well, I found it on YouTube, but I can make you a copy of it. He goes, oh, cool. So I think what I did was one of those online downloaders, I downloaded it and burned it on a disc and mailed it to Stan Lee. So, and I thought that was cool. So then when I thought about doing the Sal Buscema podcast, I said, well, I have Stan Lee's handler's email. I'm going to invite the guy. And so the email got to him and said, here's a phone number. This is how you get in. I'm like, I was just given the doors was just open for me. So when Stan got on the phone, I don't think Stan knew we were recording a podcast. He thought we were on a
drunk as a skunk.
Drunk as a Stan cussed a little bit. If you listen to that old podcast, Stan thought what do they call those phone lines back in the 70s or the 60s?
Party line.
I think Stan thought we were on a party line on the phone. It was me and DeFalco and friends and Sal on a party line, not an actual podcast. So Stan was like, how the hell are you, Sal? And so I talked to him for like half an hour, and that was around the time in the comic strip where One More Day, I asked him about, because Peter had a dream where he woke up single in the newspaper strip, and he said something about we're going to go back to the default soon. So I thought that was cool. But having Stan on this podcast was just a get that I'll never top. And I tried to get Ditko. I mean, how could I get Ditko? I tried to get John Romita Sr. too. I have not had much luck either. But the third, actually, I got 4 interactions with Stan Lee.
You have a picture on Facebook with him.
I do. That's my very last appearance. I'm going to mention. Don just mentioned Josh Bertoni a while back. Josh was covering news at 2010, I think.
Yeah.
Comic-Con, and he rushed to the stage after Stan's panel, and I had him. Bertoni had the "I Heart the Crawlspace" sign. He went up to Stan. Bertoni's got a picture of him holding the sign. I love the Crawlspace, and he said, to Stan, my buddy Brad just had a baby. Could you wish him congrats? The baby's name is Ava. And so I have audio of Stan saying, congrats to Ava Marie. And I will always be indebted to Bertoni for getting the audio of that. Essentially, Spider-Man's daddy blessing this daddy for having a baby. So I had Spider-Man's dad's blessing for having a baby. So I will always be indebted to him for doing that. The last interaction I had was at the St. Louis Comic-Con, or it may have been Tulsa Comic-Con. No, or was it Chicago? No, it was Chicago. I take that back. It was Chicago. And Wizard World, it was a Wizard World con. And you know they have the photos, and you can buy photos for XYZ. Stan Lee was $70. And I said, I better do it. I better do it. What other opportunity am I going to have? And when you take these photos with these celebs, they herd you like cattle. Like, boom, 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 boom. And again, I went up to Stan for all that. The interaction probably was 30 seconds, if that, to a minute. And I said, Stan, how you doing? Welcome to Chicago. Thank you again for all these years of entertainment. And he said, thanks, kid, and snap. And that was it. And that was the last time I talked to the guy. So I just always, for having to deal with thousands of people on an almost daily basis and being in your 90s and your 80s, my gosh, what an ambassador. What an ambassador. McNulty, thank you. I like that story. Any other thoughts? George, since you and Neil, you joined a little bit late. Favorite Spider-Man story, George? Written by Stan?
Probably that early Doc Ock story, with the Master Planner.
Yeah.
Yeah. Of course, you know, you had the iconic moment, you know, when he lifts all the crap off of him, you know, one of my all-time favorite Spider-Man moments, you know, and it's such a defining moment for the character, you know, and the character, that's the greatest thing about the character is that the character doesn't give up. Unless Joke would say it mandates it editorially. I knew you could. Dude, it's
just like old times, Don.
I'm not. No, man. Hi, I'm George Raymond. Have we met? Of course I'm on but no.
Wasn't that when Tony Stark inspired him to lift that up?
Yeah.
I'll slap you.
Anyone can win a fight when the odds are easy. It's when the going gets tougher, there's no way out. If you're not a hero without the suit, then you're not a hero at all.
Then give up your Iron Man armor, Tony.
So Don quotes bad quotes too.
Javi is the reason I keep the pimp hand strong. Okay. All right. So probably the Master Planner story. I would say for me, for like the early days, that's like kind of the really the hallmark of like the pinnacle of the Stan and Steve work. I would say.
Yeah. Neil, your favorite Spider-Man Stan story?
ASM 13.
Oh, we talked about Mysterio. Yeah. That's right. That's right. I think one more around the panel, and I think we're going to wrap it up. There's so many Stan Lee cameos. Going back, I saw a list of them. One of the very first one was the Trial of the Incredible Hulk from '89, Mallrats '95, X-Men 2000. Spider-Man related. I was going to go through the Spider-Man related one. And the very first Tobey Maguire, Stan Lee is a scene where he helps a little girl escape from debris that was falling from the Green Goblin. Dang that Goblin, JR. Taking out little girls. Spider-Man 2. He again helps an innocent bystander from debris falling by Doc Ock. Stan's just shoving people out of the way.
Apparently he had dialogue in both those scenes and they got cut and he did not like that.
Oh, what was his dialogue? Do you remember? Have you heard?
I think it was in the Marvel The Untold Story. They mentioned that he had a line, whereas like in the finished cut, he says like "look out" or whatever, and he was a little annoyed.
They cut out his "look out."
in one of them, like
he's got the glasses.
Yeah, he's selling glasses. He's like, hey kid, buy these. They wore them in the X-Men.
I can't remember which one it was, but like it's one of the Maguire ones. But at the end of it, like they're going to give Spider-Man like the key to the city.
That's number 3.
Number 3. Okay, and he had like a line in that.
Let me go through all the movies. and he says to Peter Parker, who's in Times Square, "I guess one person can make a difference." Enough said is what he said in 3.
That was the one, yeah.
The one in the Maguire first Spider-Man was where he was a librarian putting books away, and in the background, the Lizard and Spider-Man were fighting. I love that table that gets thrown at him, and Spider-Man stops the table from hitting him. In Spider-Man, Amazing Spider-Man 2, he's at Peter Parker's graduation, and he notices a quick change, and he says, I know that guy, or something like that. Doesn't he? Well, what is the line he says?
Hey,
you guys remember?
I know that guy.
Okay, that's what he says. Okay. Let's see. In Civil War, which had Spider-Man in it, he goes, he's a FedEx delivery guy, and he goes to Tony Stark's house and asks if Tony Stank.
Tony Stank, yeah,
lives there.
Favorite.
Neil, have you been to Austin Books?
Yes, I have.
So at our local comic shop, they have a whole section to Hot Toys, and they're all on display in a glass case.
Wait a minute, is this still comics related, Javi?
Yeah, this is comics related because he and I live in the same city.
No, he said Hot Toys. I started thinking about something else.
Nah, not the Spider-Man adult movie, George.
Let me get.
So they've got all the Marvel figures and the DC figures and all that, but they have the Stan Lee figure.
Cool.
From just a generic Stan Lee figure, but they custom made a sign with a little word bubble that says, "Are you Tony Stank?"
Nice. I like that. And then in Homecoming, he was in the on a windowsill, and he said, "Don't make me come down there," or something like that. I remember that.
Don't make me come down there, you punk! God, I can't
punk. That was really funny.
One thing you're forgetting, Brad, and you kind of zoomed past.
What's that?
Although it's not a cameo in the film, he was on the DVD and the extras for the first X-Men movie. He
was a hot dog vendor in the X-Men movie.
No. In the X-Men movie, he when they're in the Statue of Liberty, they had a scene. Singer had somebody dressed as Spider-Man run out and come up behind him.
Oh, I remember that. Yeah, that was an extra in the DVD. That wasn't Stan though.
No.
But, there was Spider-Man. I got you. And
then, you know what? You're right, and I'm an asshole. I don't know why I was thinking of just Spider-Man. I guess because we started talking about the Spider-Man 3 movie.
It's okay. I got one more. In Infinity
I'm gonna go
War,
over here and finish my flu.
The most recent one, Spider-Man related, was in Infinity War when he was driving the bus, and he says, "quote You've never seen a spaceship before." I take that back. One more. He was in the Venom movie.
For some reason.
Yeah, exactly. He says, "Hey, don't give up on her." As he's walking his dog, he says,
"Don't give up on her.
Don't give up on her, either of you." So he's talking to the symbiote, and he's talking to Eddie Brock.
That one was funny because I tried to rationalize he has nothing to do with Venom. Like, why? Oh, yeah. Wait. Barney Bushkin was a text message. That's who he created. That's why he's in the film.
He's just a watcher. He just
there was one more you forgot, Brad. You forgot the Teen Titans Go to the Movies one.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that one was great.
So, here, let's go around the horn. What's your favorite Stan Lee cameo, Zach?
Whoa.
Watch your language, Spider-Gwen.
Is that a costume?
Are we just
what the hell
gonna?
are you wearing?
He looks like one. He looks like one.
Hey Ben, did you bleach your hoodie?
He looks like one of the Hanson brothers from Slapstop.
Oh my gosh. Okay, we'll go back to Zach.
Fun of me?
No.
Is that a Ushanka hat and a hoodie? What the hell is wrong with you?
I live in Texas.
You're supposed to be a man, goddammit. You live in Texas for F's sake.
I don't like being cold, you asshole.
All right. It's a memorial, not an insult fest. It's not a roast. Although Stan would probably like a roast.
Every month
that was my mistake going to Zach first twice. Okay, JR, your favorite Stan Lee cameo?
Probably when he tried to get into Susan Reed's wedding in Fantastic Four #2.
Oh, yeah.
But I'm Stan Lee. Yeah, buddy.
Yeah. Neil, what's your favorite Stan Lee cameo?
I'm gonna pick a rare one that no one ever goes with, and the one that he did in Ant-Man, where Luis is talking and Stan Lee is being voiced over by Luis, and it's like he just seems like sometimes in the MCU he looks like he's kind of there by obligation, but with Ant-Man he looked like he was having the time of his life.
Kind of like with the Deadpool cameo. He was the DJ in the strip club. That was kind of funny.
He had the time of his life.
Yeah,
I'm sure he was.
I think I saw Stan was upset that it wasn't really in a strip club. Like there were no naked women there. I think it was just Stan at a green screen. He was like,
at the very least, Stan could have been getting a lap dance.
I mean, apparently, according to, I don't remember where I heard it, but I think they said that they have like 2 hours plus worth of green screen of Stan that they'll probably use in other movies.
Yeah.
So my favorite one, and it's kind of Crawlspace related.
Oh, nice.
Is the Incredible Hulk cameo. And the reason why it's Crawlspace related is because when he did the Salby Simba podcast, that was like he spent 5 minutes talking about how he had to say, "Whoa."
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Oh yeah, in the interview he said that where he was a juror with Bill Bixby.
No. Where he was dropping that soda.
Oh, that's right. The dropping the soda. He had to say whoa.
He had to say whoa, and then the whoa never even made it in the movie.
No.
That's funny. I forgot about that. I'm gonna put that podcast on the front page again so people can hear it.
It's probably the apex of that beginning era of the show.
Yeah. Let's see. Javi, favorite podcast. You're on it. Favorite cameo.
I'm going to be unconventional, and I'm going to go with the PS4.
Ooh,
that one meant the most to me out of all of them.
That one's really good. And
now for a shot of Frederick Douglass, we go to Donovan Morgan Grant. I'm sorry.
I had to hook this thing up.
Don, you got a favorite cameo?
My favorite movie one's probably Spider-Man 3, but I want to mention the 90s show because he was in the final episode and Peter Parker met his god and said, "I like myself." And he's like, "You're not Spider-Man. Spider-Man hates himself."
Yeah.
You're definitely not like the
Spider-Man 3 is easily like, that. Honestly, when I saw that today, like I had just a wealth of sadness in my heart because he's like, one person can make a difference. Enough said. It's like that's really sad.
That of the 3 Spider-Man cameos in the original Raimi trilogy, that was probably the best one. Even though it's woefully out of place now, it's kind of a treasure.
Ashley, your favorite cameo? What do you like?
I think it was a trailer for The Defenders, the Netflix show. He was doing a monologue over it, and at the end he says, heroes are, it boils down to heroes are only human. And I think that is just what sets Marvel superheroes apart from any other superhero, that at the end of the day, these people are just human. They have flaws, they have vulnerabilities. In spite of everything they can do, they're just people.
Right. George, what's your favorite?
I don't know. I liked a lot of the cameos he did on like Big Bang Theory.
Yeah, that was hysterical.
But I mean, there's a lot of TV
coming into comic book
guys.
Yeah.
But I think I like I don't know, for some reason I keep coming back to the like seeing him in Guardians of the Galaxy because he's like with like a hot space chick. He's like a dirty old sugar daddy with like a hot space chick. I was
dirty old man.
Like Rocket's like, go find your wife.
I love the Watcher. I thought that threw me for a loop.
I like him as a Watcher too.
Did y'all catch that he's in the Guardians of the Galaxy 2 cameo? He's actually talking to the Watchers about his cameos in the MCU.
Oh yeah,
specifically referencing the Tony Stark one.
And then they just leave him. They just left him to die in space.
No, he is a Watu now. Now that they own Fox, they can officially say he is a Watu.
What if they transform Stan Lee into Watu?
That'd probably be a disrespectful thing to do.
That would probably.
I took that as.
I imagine the estate of Stan Lee would have a problem with that.
I took that scene in Guardians 2. I took that scene as confirmation that he is himself a Watcher.
Yeah, I did too.
I felt that they were saying that Stan Lee is a Watcher, just in a mortal form or whatever.
Well, I think even James Gunn even confirmed. He's like, "Look, I saw the theory online, thought it was great, then we decided to put it into the movie."
It's one of those retroactive editions, like when they did in Iron Man 2, the kid that Iron Man saves is Peter. Woohoo!
Yeah,
but they do it all the time.
Oh. Did I miss anybody for their favorite cameo? Peter, did I get you, Peter?
Nope.
Okay, what's your favorite cameo?
Spider-Man 3, and then Civil War, where he calls Stark Stank. That
yes,
I loved it.
Tony Stank.
Tony Stank. I thought that was hysterical.
What about Stripperella?
He was in Stripperella? What was that?
He co-created Stripperella with Pam Anderson.
Oh my gosh! Wow.
Stanley liked the women.
There were some duds that Stan did, especially like in the latter half of his life. That I mean, do we need to bring up POW Entertainment? Anyone?
Wow.
Remember StanLeeEntertainment.com? Remember those two films? I mean, look, I love Stan, but he was not a businessman. He was a great creative mind.
He was a businessman.
He was a businessman in the 60s.
He was a businessman. What the hell are you talking
No,
about?
but I meant like later on in his life, he had some very bad business deals that he made in terms of operating new startup business.
Yeah. I remember there was that one publisher he did the.
Glad we can slip that into the memorial.
Yeah, me too.
You're welcome. Thanks, Zach.
Sorry, Don. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh,
I'm sorry. I thought you were. I apologize. I cut somebody off.
This is going to be a giant size episode. McNulty is going to join us in just a second.
Oh lordy!
How many of these little windows at the bottom? We're going to talk to Mike in just a second and get a couple thoughts. Any other thoughts that are just running through your brain that we haven't discussed that you guys wanted to get off your chest?
I want to say a little something.
Yeah.
And it's funny because and I'd said this for a long time, like when he stopped doing appearances and everything, and I said every day we have with Stan is a blessing at this point.
Yes. I remember that.
And so we all knew it was coming, and we've known this for a few years now, really. And I don't know, so when it actually happened, when I actually found out, when I got the word, when I heard the news, I thought I would be a lot sadder than I was, but I wasn't. I was happy. I was happy for him. I mean, and I heard someone else say it today, earlier this evening, and I think it's true. You don't mourn the loss, you celebrate the life.
Mm-hmm.
95 years, folks. I mean, that's a hell of a run.
Mm-hmm.
And he doesn't have the same struggles anymore. He's with his wife again. And he's always going to be. He's never going to be forgotten. He's always going to be there. He's huge. He's bigger. He's bigger than a lot of other people. I'll put it that way.
He's as big as Walt Disney.
Yeah, and so he's iconic. He's always going to live on as a brand. He'll always be with us. Mm-hmm. But I'm glad he doesn't have to suffer now with jackholes trying to steal his money.
Yeah,
all that crap.
The virtue signalers are some of the virtue signalers are out there saying, "Oh, he was a predatory human being."
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure there's jerk off sites that are out there oh well, it's important to remember that Stan Lee screwed over all these other people or whatever because you have all these revisionist tools out there that'd say crap like that on a day like this. But that's not what today's about. Today's about remembering a man, a World War II vet, a very successful businessman, someone who, if it hadn't been for him, we may not even be reading comics today.
That's how I opened up the show, George. I said his web weaved all of our friendships on this panel.
It did.
I mean, otherwise we wouldn't know each other without Stan Lee.
That's true.
And Spider-Man's creation.
I wouldn't know Zach, and I guess in that, when you phrase it that way. I mean,
we have one more panelist, Mike. What's up, Mike?
Howdy, folks. Wish it was here. Well, my light burned out. My light burned out.
he is the man in the shadows.
Yes.
Oh, that's funny.
You really are living up to your
reputation. Mike Shadow.
We'll get a couple answers out of Mike real quick before we wrap this up. Mike, favorite Stan Lee Spider-Man written story. What do you think?
Okay. Oh, favorite Stan Lee story. Well, I was just writing on the chat. I'm surprised nobody. I'm not sure if they've mentioned it yet. What about Amazing Fantasy 15?
Yeah, we mentioned that.
You did mention that? Okay, well that was my pick.
Yeah.
Because I just figured that's the story that basically just started it all. Basically, I mean, and then another contender would probably be maybe Amazing Spider-Man 50. That's kind of a sentimental moment there too. You could probably, there's probably just there's probably so many you can probably just pick to choose from, and there's like so many. Like you've got the you've got the drug issues, you've got the thing about you've got some about the, like George already mentioned the Master Planner saga. You've got that oh gosh, the list trying tumbling over like the first Sinister Six appearance and everything like this. I mean, just and then you got to go beyond just Spider-Man. You just if you start going into stuff like with fantastic stuff on Fantastic Four and Doctor Strange and Iron Man and all this other stuff, it just
one thing that I think is worth mentioning is that when you're kind of talking about his favorite Spider-Man stories, everyone's favorite Spider-Man stories, I mean, he co-created so many characters.
Yeah.
And you cannot put your hand on your heart and say that Stan Lee's Daredevil run is the best run of the character. You can't say that about X-Men or the Hulk because they were canceled when he was writing the stories. People is still within the conversation to say that the greatest Spider-Man run was Stan Lee's run. People are still chasing that run. Yeah, and I know that he's definitely there's some terrific runs afterwards, but no one has said that like the Stan Lee run isn't in the conversation for like the top 3 runs of all time.
Yeah, right. Because Spider-Man I think encapsulates everything that Stan Lee wanted to say about what he envisioned the superhero to be.
And he thought of the character the longest out of all of them.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, that was the one that was kind of closest to his heart and everything. I mean, like that's. I mean, if he's going to be, I mean, that is the one. I think even by his own admission, he even said that that's the one character that everyone kind of associates him with, even though he's got supposed to be create or co-create all these other ones. That's the one everyone's going to look fondly on him.
That was his favorite.
Time. Yep.
Yeah. Yep. And it was our favorite too.
Yep.
Oh
yeah. Mike, favorite cameo by Stan Lee in the movies.
Okay, this is going to be a little unconventional because I know, first of all, my clone already stole the favorite cameo.
Your clone. No, you are my clone.
Don't get him
started. Okay. Oh, Lord. All right. Well, you stole the one for the Incredible Hulk, not the TV show, the one with where Edward Norton played. The drink thing. So my standby was when he played the librarian in the Amazing Spider-Man, where he's just basically listening to the headphones, and you see all those stuff like basically going on in the background. Yeah, that was actually probably one of the few good moments in that entire movie.
I like that you called it your. I like that you called it your standby. I thought that was kind of nice.
Yeah,
that was nice alliteration. Did you ever meet or interact with him, Mike?
No, but that's the thing. I mean, even if you didn't actually meet him in person, you still felt like you knew the guy. I mean, you still felt like, even if you read, because one of the unique things about whenever you read one of his comics or read the Stan Soapbox stuff in the back and it felt like he was still talking to you.
Yeah.
I mean, and he didn't talk. True. And the thing, and he felt like, and the thing is, you can always feel like that he wasn't talking down to you. He always kind of figured that his audience were pretty bright.
Well, it's why the Mary Marvel. It's why the Mary Marvel Marching Society was so big. It was like
exactly.
It was making you part of something. It wasn't just something you were buying. It was like it was a culture. All of a sudden,
Yeah, and I think it was an interesting comparison that somebody made about that he was like the Mr. Rogers. Well, or the difference is that I would kind of consider that Stan Lee was kind of like the personification of the cool uncle that you had, the guy who basically, that he's not necessarily like the grandfather, not like Walt Disney, where he was kind of like the kindly guy, but no, this Stan Lee was the cool guy that you wanted to hang out with, and basically said like, "Oh, I've got some crazy stories that I got to tell you," and everything like this. And you're
Uncle
not
Fun who likes to drink and chase young chicks.
Yeah, and you're not sure, and you're not even sure if half the stuff he says you even believe, but you don't care anyway because he's just so much fun to to be around.
That's funny. Yeah. Before we go to the final thoughts around the panel, we're going to read some YouTubers. Final thoughts. Curtis says Stan's soapbox was better than a lot of issues of Amazing. I think that's. Let's see. Matt Bird. My best memory was he was always writing or want to be the great American novelist. Is my best standout moment of the man. He always wanted to be the great American novelist. That's why he shortened his name to Stan Lee, not Stanley Lieber, because he wanted to save that for his great American novel. Adam also says there will never be another Stan. Vinkman the two biggest creative geniuses who've had the biggest impacts on my life are Jim Henson and Stan Lee. Jim left far too soon. By contrast, Stan had a good long life. Joey, Stan truly is our generation's Walt Disney. We'll always have him around. He's not going anywhere. Stan's legacy will truly outlive all of us. Thank you, Stan. Let's see. DJ Strong, aka Spider. Stan has always been an influence on my life for as long as I can remember. His works, particularly with Spider-Man, shaped my life and personality. Adam says, I miss Don on the podcast.
Rest in peace, Stanley.
Rest in peace, Stanley.
I always love seeing Don.
I love seeing Don, too. I like Don.
I miss Don so damn much. Don is the most unpredictable out of all the people we used to have on the show who aren't here.
Yeah.
He really is. He's like a wild card. You'd never know what Don can say or how he'll say it.
Yeah, dude. I would sum that up very well.
You kick it over back to Don, and you expect Don to agree with you, and then suddenly Don's like, "Well, no, everything you said was wrong, and I personally insulted, and let me explain to you how."
AK Black Cat in a Milk Bath. When Don said he dropped an F-bomb at me, didn't he?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. I literally quoted that on the Patreon exclusive Black Cat.
Yeah. Yeah. We quoted you last night when we recorded, Don. It was really funny.
I will say talking to you guys.
Cody, much love for Stan and Don tonight. Cody says, when I heard the news, it was like finding out my father died. He made such an impact on my life, and now we have to take the lessons he taught us and pass them on. Jonathan also says, creative genius, fantastic storyteller, innovator, inspiration. He was so many things to so many people. Rest in peace, Stan. All right, let's go around the horn. Final thoughts out of JR. We haven't heard JR in a while. What's your final thoughts on the passing of a legend? Yeah. Good God, Zach.
Zach, take off the hoodie. It's blocking the circulation of blood to your brain.
Take two. JR, final thoughts on the passing of a legend.
Well, really, there isn't really much you can add. I mean, he was one of the most significant figures ever in American popular culture. Yeah. And, his influence will be felt for generations. So there's not much else to add.
Right. So, Ashley, final thoughts.
First, I had to say how genuinely happy I am that he was able to live to see the MCU grow to the scale that it did, and how many lives, after touching so many already, that he got to expand his legacy and exponentially more after that, and be such a treasured part of it. My sympathies go out to his family for their loss, and my life literally would not be what it is now without him.
Yeah. Peter, final thoughts.
Final thoughts, Excelsior forever. Thank you, Stan, for creating Spider-Man, which, of course, led me to you guys.
Yeah.
So I'm always grateful for that. And our very own Nick Spencer, an amazing Spider-Man writer right now, said on Instagram, shows a picture of Stan smiling, and he's saying, seeing this smile on his face reminds me of the best moments of my entire career. And, whatever Stan went through, he was always smiling. He loved life, and he loved his fans.
No doubt. Final thoughts, Javi.
We just lost Steve Ditko recently, and this stings a lot more. Ditko was, a recluse. He kept to himself. But, Stan Lee was one of our family. I don't remember a Spider-Man without him. He was the voice in the video games, voices in the cartoons. He was in the movies. He's just so ingrained in not only Spider-Man or Marvel, but just life in general. I wouldn't be who I am without his influence, and I wouldn't be here with you without it. And we knew this was coming, but it doesn't make it, hurt necessarily any less. Right. And I'm just grateful, for the work, for his imagination that he put out into the world. And we brought up all those celebrities who paid their respects. But that's just a small handful of people that had jobs that could make a living because of his imagination.
Yeah.
There are thousands of people that have been able to feed their kids, have a house, because he had crazy dreams and brought them to reality.
Yeah.
So I will forever be grateful for the work that he did.
No doubt. Mike, final thoughts.
Oh, what do you say? Basically about the Sandman Lee. I mean, I don't think any of us, obviously, none of us would be here if it were not for his contribution to comics and to pop culture and to, film and television, everything just across the board. I mean, I think all of us, I think in some ways he was probably maybe in no small thing. He's probably maybe without even maybe realizing it, he was probably the first thing we ever read was one of his comics, maybe, in some respects. In fact, I would go as far as to say that if it wasn't for Stan Lee, I don't think comics wouldn't even exist today as they are now. I mean,
That's
I think
true.
he just, yeah,
they were dying in the 50s.
Yeah, yeah. I think he single-handedly. I think without his contribution, I think comics would have been faded into obscurity a long time ago. And the fact that they've become, the fact that his characters have lived on and become so, ingrained in our imagination and kind of like, and also as kind of like, they're kind of like household names right now, and they're going to live on they're going to live on forever, and essentially. And I think in some ways, even though he's gone and stuff, he's going to, he'll do likewise. Because in a sense, he's probably maybe the greatest creation of all, essentially.
Oh, so. That's pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
Neil, final thoughts.
So I was in class when I heard that Stan Lee died, and that hit me like a freight train because, well, I didn't get to mention this, but I didn't really meet Stan Lee, but I passed him by when I was walking on the convention floor in 2014. And for 14 or how long ago was that? 4 years. For 16-year-old me, that was like walking past God.
Oh, that was way different. I thought you were going to say you could have stopped him, but you didn't, and then he went on and killed your Uncle Ben. I thought that had a different ending.
I think that did happen, but the point is that, like, when I kind of immortalized Stan in my subconscious, like when you have this guy who has pretty much surpassed everybody else in terms of the creative zeitgeist of our current landscape, you start to think this guy can't die. Like he will just absorb everybody else's life force before he explodes and takes the entire universe with him.
He's bigger than life.
And so it's really hard to process. And I'm glad that he had a hell of a good life. Like, he was happily married. He lived 95 years, and he will probably outlive all of us just through his characters alone.
Well, JR is only a couple years away, so.
Neil, you were talking about how he was married. One thing that I thought was so sweet, one of the most recent Comic-Cons I saw him at, he loved his wife. And I don't have the number in front of me, but how many years those two were married. And he talked about how she inspired him to write that Fantastic Four book like he wanted it. And when they got in fights, they would throw things. And they were madly in love. Like, the typewriter, I think, was destroyed or something in a fight that he wrote the Fantastic Four on. But he talked about how much he loved her. And I read some of the stories about a writer that used to go out to lunch with Stan Lee like once every other month or something like that. And every time they ended the lunch, he was like, well, got to go home to Joni. Like, I can't imagine being married that long and just still being madly in love. You know, JR?
No, I can't even imagine a fraction of that time instead.
Anyway. Wives are both behind you with a rolling pin, just patting on their phone.
Yeah, no doubt. So that's why one of the cameos that we did not mention, which was a bad movie, but it was X-Men Apocalypse. But when he's holding his wife in that cameo is really the best part of that movie for me.
As the nukes are coming up.
Yeah, as the nukes are coming and Stan's holding Joni and they're looking up in the sky. I just thought that was really sweet.
Did they kill him in that movie?
No,
he got better.
Too close.
Final thoughts, George.
Going back to what I think it was Javi said earlier, and I had said this to you earlier today, Brad. Stan and Steve, we lose them in the same year.
Yeah.
2018, which is oddly enough the same year that Amazing Spider-Man becomes readable again.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a bittersweet year, But no, when I think about Stan Lee, I think about all the things that I owe personally to Stan Lee. My vocabulary is much larger.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks to Stan Lee, I showed a heightened interest in wanting to read much earlier. I think than other kids my age because of Stan Lee.
Yeah.
I have a better sense of humor thanks to Stan Lee. I know everyone else does that. It's okay. Just there was a lot of common sense life wisdom to learn from Stan's stories. And whether it's, from great power comes, also comes great responsibility. Or as I mentioned earlier, that whole, the whole never give up element of the character,
True.
And that's something that I try to impress into younger people all the time, is that there's no bigger element in life to hold you back than yourself.
Yeah.
If you tell yourself that you can't do certain things, you'll never do them because you're defeating yourself before you even start. But I've always liked that. I've always liked the don't quit, keep going on, no matter how bad it's beating you down.
Amen to that.
You got to keep going forward. And
very good.
That's one of the things I've always liked so much about the character, and so I owe Stan that as well. But I
also like that you said he's with his wife.
Oh yeah. I was thinking, I lost my grandfather just a couple of years ago. He was 95. He was a World War II vet. He was a couple of years older than Stan because he had died that year before last. But I thought the same thing when he passed. He's with my grandmother. And what a great life. That you live that long and you celebrate the life. But no, I thank you, Stan Lee, for everything you gave us and everything, the way you inspired us, the way you made us more creative, the way you taught us big words at a young age.
I remember in an interview in the 80s, he said, I don't mind kids going to the dictionary and looking up stuff.
Yeah.
I don't mind that. I thought that was awesome. A great soundbite from him.
And in a lot of ways, he was sort of like the J.K. Rowling of like his time,
Oh yeah,
yeah.
Getting a whole generation to read stuff.
He wanted to be a playwright, right? He wanted to be like
he wanted great American writer. Yeah.
The Great American
Novel.
Well, in a way, though, the fact that I think he wrote something, he came up with something better than the Great American Novel, if you think about it.
That's true.
One way.
And he's inspired so many other types of writers. He's inspired TV writers, movie writers, comic writers, /fic writers,
stripperella,
playwrights,
strippers. Yeah,
across the spectrum. Everyone's been encouraged by Stan Lee. Porn. He's inspired porn.
Oh Lord,
literally.
Zach, did I get a final thought out of you?
No, I have to follow porn.
Okay. I'm making Donovan the closer. So Zach, last thought.
I will say this. There's two things. One, I want to give a shout out to Eddie D'Angelini and Josh
thank you, Eddie.
Because without those two, we wouldn't have gotten that Stanley interview that I've mentioned several times tonight. But
and the Ava blessing, yeah,
the Ava blessing as well. But let me say this: no one was as much of a tour de force in terms of tirelessly working with and interacting fans than Stanley. Stan Lee is the gold standard on how to interact with fans, and he hated when people were mad at him. But like with Death When Stacy, he's like, "Oh, I didn't authorize that."
But, he totally passed the buck to Conway.
Yeah, I did.
But he adored the fact that he even had fans, and the fact that like to echo Ashley, he got to see his dream that he had in the 70s. Of seeing Marvel on the big screen, whether it be the Spider-Man movies or the X-Men movies or god-awful Punisher movies or Fantastic Four movies that sucked. it didn't matter. Those stories that him and Jack and Stan and Steve and John got to do, and John Buscema, they all were up on the screen, and those characters that they put their hearts and souls into, because they literally didn't know what else to do. They were literally desperate to be able to work. The fact is that they've brought a lot of joy to a lot of people, and if we could even imagine a 1% of the amount of joy that Stan Lee has brought to so many people around the world, I think the world would be a lot better place.
Very true. Don, final thoughts.
Is everybody else gone?
Yeah, you're my closer.
No pressure.
Like I said, like I was playing the game, this PS4 game, when Josh texted me, and I was profoundly sad. And the whole day I was genuinely depressed. This is a day that like we would talk about. I would I would be talking to my brother about just what do you think is happening, the new Marvel movie, or like what are you reading? It's like when Stan Lee dies, that's going to suck. And when it happened, and I messaged him, he got back to me when he could. And I was, trying to, because I did the same thing when Steve Ditko died. I did the same thing when Norm Brayfogle died, putting on social media what I thought was really emblematic of their creative talent. Like we always have time for Steve Ditko and John Romita, but like he wrote dialogue that we attached to Peter Parker's personality, whether it was a Steve Ditko issue or a John Romita issue. And I was scrolling through my Twitter feed, and Jake Tapper had posted a GIF of Stan Lee just going like "Excelsior," and I burst into tears because, as creative and as huge of his creative output as he was, as complicated of a figure as he was, and what he did right and what he did wrong, when I think of Stan Lee, I think of a friend who really brought in entertainment to children. I knew what he did as a job, and I knew what he did like physically in terms of output, but he was always a friend.
Yeah.
He was always somebody who was very ingratiating towards newcomers and very, let's find out what Spider-Man's doing today in this cartoon, no matter what media it was. He was in the PlayStation cartoon. He was in the PS4 cartoon. He was in the 80s cartoon. He was in the 90s cartoon. All the movies. Like, and it's funny because, there's been celebrity deaths before that I felt sad about, that I really, for the whole day. But I mean, this one to me is like as close to, because I didn't know either of my grandfathers, and this is about as close as it gets to that. And I really was kind of going through this whole day in sort of just sort of a funk. But I get on. You guys are like, bringing up certain things and making jokes and stuff. And it's like, yeah, Stan Lee I've never seen him. I mean, I've seen him, kind of flummoxed at times, but I've never seen him down too much. And I think it's a good way to kind of remember him as everyone's friend, whether you were into comics or storytelling in general, no matter what genre it was, sci-fi, horror, fantasy, romance, comedy, he was everyone's friend, and he deserves to be remembered for bringing happiness to people, even if it was just in a cameo. So I think that I'm happy that we're ending tonight so positive, because it's the way he deserves to be remembered, rather than the feeling that he's gone. It's like, well, he's not really gone, because we can't forget him.
Right. Very true.
And damn it, he deserves that Oscar that he was lobbying for.
The cameo, the best cameos.
Yeah. He's as gone as Elvis, man. I mean, he's eternal. He will be here forever. Yeah. In 100 years, people will still be talking about what Stan Lee did.
Walt Disney, Jim Henson, Frank Sinatra, Elvis Presley. Yep. You're always talking about them. Two things I'd like to say before I go. Thank you to Stan Lee for creating my favorite character of all time. Thank you to Stan Lee for the friendships I've experienced tonight, and also I've had experienced with this website over the last 20 years. Without Stan Lee, I wouldn't know any of the people that I've been talking to for the last hour and a half, or the people in the YouTube chat, or the people that I've talked to on the website over 20 years. Stan Lee makes friendships, and he makes memories, and he will continue to do that long after he's gone. So rest in peace, Stan Lee. We all love you.
A rest well earned.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Excelsior.
All right.